Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you read the title of this video, then you already know we have recently returned from a Disney cruise in Europe. The particular itinerary that we did was called Northern Europe and the Norwegian Fjords. It was a 7-night cruise leaving from Southampton, which is kind of maybe an hour-ish from London, England, and then the 4 ports that we stopped were Zeebrugge, Belgium, Copenhagen, Denmark, Oslo, Norway, and Mekarvik, Norway. I'm probably saying that wrong. And then in parentheses, it said Stavanger, since that's really the city you want to go to when you're in that area. So it was on the Disney Dream, and the cruise ended a week ago, actually, a week ago today. So over the past week, I've kind of been just trying to collect my thoughts about what I wanted to say, because unfortunately, this is the first Disney cruise that we've actually been ready to leave. By the end of the trip, I don't think any of us were sad that it was time to go. And it's the first time we haven't booked a placeholder for the next one. So it was kind of weird, and I'm trying to sort through just why, and because nothing bad happened. We didn't have a particular experience that was that was horrible. It was just kind of, the whole thing just didn't really feel like a magical Disney cruise. So I've been just kind of sorting through my thoughts and trying to put it together, because I think some of it they were things that if I had known going into it, maybe my expectations would have been different, and then we wouldn't have maybe been so disappointed while we were there. So hopefully this video maybe can help somebody in planning for the future if this is an itinerary that you're interested in doing, so that you have accurate expectations and maybe don't end up being disappointed at the end of the trip. So first of all, I just thought this was weird, but there was no Elsa on that ship. So, Frozen is probably one of the biggest Disney hits of all time, definitely within the last, 15 years, right? Massively popular success based in Norway. This is a Disney cruise to the Norwegian Fjords, and there was no Elsa. There were no character greets with Elsa. She didn't appear in any of the shows, even for one song. There was nothing. I just feel like it was such a missed opportunity to kind of tie in the theming of the destination to a very popular Disney movie. And in our situation, my brother is a huge Frozen fan. That's why he was excited for this trip, or one of the main reasons. And the whole week was just looking for Elsa, and was so disappointed that there was no Elsa. And to me, it was just weird. You have all of the character actors who are the other princesses that I'm sure could be an Elsa if you switched the hair and the dress. So it was just strange that that was not part of it. They did have the only mention of Frozen, besides they played it on Funnel Vision one day, and they had the Frozen menu at dinner one night, but they didn't do the deck show or anything that goes with it in Alaska. It was just the menu at dinner, and that menu is horrible. So of all the things, even our waiter staff, they were saying yeah, this is a very unpopular menu with our guests. So it's of all the things that you're gonna do that are Frozen related, that's not the one you should have done. So if you have Frozen fans that are very excited to go to Norway because of that, just beware that you may want to level set expectations ahead of time, that you might see Elsa. Don't guarantee that you will see Elsa, because I honestly thought it was a given that Elsa would be everywhere on this ship, and she was nowhere to be seen. On that similar note, just the lack of theming overall for the European destinations was very minimal. I think some of the characters, the classic Minnie, Mickey, Goofy, Donald, they had European outfits, but the ones that we saw anyways were like French and Spanish outfits. So they weren't really anything related to the specific itinerary that we were on, more like the Mediterranean style in like those countries over there. So it wasn't, if that is something you're looking for, which I feel like us, we are coming from the US, so the European part is new and different and something we can't get here. I feel like it was disappointing. So if that is something, like if that's a selling point for you as a reason you would choose to do a Disney cruise over something else, just be aware that it's very minimal. And this wasn't a huge deal, but even in the gift shop, they had like one style of European merchandise. They had it on like a short sleeve and a long sleeve and a sweatshirt, I think, like a couple different types of shirts, but it was just the same style. And it said like the dream of Europe, but then it had like all the different countries that they went to like throughout the whole summer. So it had Italy, Spain, it did have Norway on there, but it had all these other places, that we didn't go to. So we didn't really, we didn't buy the shirt. We didn't really want that design. They didn't have anything that was like more specific to the region of Europe that we went to, which is fine. I mean, we didn't need t-shirts, but if you are someone who is interested in buying the merch, just beware. At least that's how it was this summer. I don't know next year if it'll be the same, but that's how it was. And then this was also the silver anniversary. And so they did have that merchandise in the shops, which seemed to be super popular. We didn't buy any of it, but I mean, it's super cute. And I would have if it wasn't so expensive. But one of the main things that came with that celebration this summer was the extra fireworks show. So I think in the Caribbean, they're doing the Pirate Night fireworks, and they're having an additional night with the silver anniversary. And I knew this before we went, so this wasn't like a disappointment when we were there, but on this itinerary, I guess similar to like Alaska, they aren't allowed to do fireworks. So we didn't have any fireworks at all. So it kind of felt like really the only silver anniversary thing was the characters had those outfits that they would wear. I think we saw them like 2 nights in those outfits. And then we did get the framed Mickey picture to take home with us. But it was a little less of the silver anniversary stuff on this itinerary than it would have been in like a Caribbean. So all of those are, they're not gonna make or break a vacation. They're just kind of a little bit like, okay, why did we do Disney over a different cruise line? Because those are the kinds of things, like those are the reasons you do Disney, right? That's the differentiator between a different cruise line and Disney. But to me, the biggest disappointment was the Norwegian Fjords in general. So when you Google Norwegian Fjords, this is what you see. So maybe I should have done more research, maybe watched some YouTube videos, I don't know. But that is what I was expecting. We had, I was super pumped. We had a balcony room, and I'm thinking we're going to be sailing through these like big, we're going to see the rocks, and we're going to be going through, and there's going to be stuff to see, and it's going to be gorgeous, and like I knew it wasn't Alaska, but I was thinking there would be scenery to see similar to like an Alaska cruise where it's just like gorgeous. You're outside on the deck and it's just beautiful scenery surrounding you, and it just feels unreal. On at least the itinerary that we did, you don't see anything like that from the actual cruise ship. You see like flat land sometimes, and I'll insert some of the footage we took from our balcony. Nothing to write home about, nothing even memorable, honestly. Now, we did do an excursion at our last port, so in Stavanger, that went on they called a rib boat. It's a small boat. I think it only held 12 people. And we went on one of those, and we went into a fjord, and it did look like that. And we saw like the waterfall, and it was beautiful, and it was gorgeous. And I'm so glad we did that. But that whole excursion was probably 2.5 hours. So out of the whole week, we saw what I was thinking the Norwegian fjords were going to look like for a couple hours, rather than being like just surrounded by this beautiful nature scenery for an entire week. So just beware if the Norwegian fjords is on your bucket list, that, you know, do some research on it. I'm sure there are probably like smaller cruise ships that maybe do go into the fjords, something like that. So maybe, you know, look beyond just your traditional big cruise lines if that's something you want to do, because I think it would be worth it. It was beautiful when we were in there, but that's just not what we were seeing from the ship. And as a side note, Disney had like no availability on the excursions there, probably because that's what everyone wanted to do. So we're gold Castaway Club members, and by the time we were able to book, those were all sold out. So it worked out because we were able to find one through a third party, but I know a lot of people on our sailing were super disappointed because that was what they really wanted to do, and it was sold out through Disney. All the third parties were sold out because everyone wanted to do the same thing. And those boats are small, so there's just not a ton of space on them. So I truly feel bad for the people who weren't able to book some sort of tour like that, because I feel like through the whole trip, you would have never seen what you're thinking like the fjords are supposed to be. So that to me was honestly the biggest disappointment. So just make sure before you book this itinerary that you do your research on like where exactly you're going to be in the fjords, and just make sure that, you know, you're going to the places you want and that you'll actually kind of see the stuff that you're thinking you're going to see, so that you don't end up disappointed at the end. The next is the food. So, and again, this may have just been my expectations weren't aligned properly before we went, but like in Alaska, they did a really great job with theming the dinner choices to the local area. So there was way more fish and seafood on the menu every night than you would typically have like in the Caribbean or something like that. And on this one, they did not do nearly as well with the theming and the regional selections. So we only had regional selections on the menu 2 of the nights, and it was the 2 days that we were in port in Norway. And they weren't really, I know for a fact, they were not all new and different options, because one of the regional selections was the god-awful lobster bisque soup that they have on every itinerary. And every single waiter we've ever had has told us not to order it, that it's absolutely disgusting, yet they still have it on the menu for some reason year after year after year. But they were calling that one of their regional selections for Norway, which I know for a fact is on all of the other itineraries too. So it didn't really feel like there was a lot of special types of food that were really themed for the destinations, which is fine. But again, just something that I was kind of looking forward to, thinking that going on a Disney cruise in Europe versus going to the Caribbean again would be very different. And I think it just ended up being more the same than I was expecting. So we've been on all 4 of the classic ships. We haven't been on the Wish, but we've been on all of the others. And the Dream had been my least favorite out of all of the ones that we did. But I thought it was because the one we did on the Dream was only 5 nights, and it was the shortest cruise we've done. And so I just thought maybe that was why. But now after being on the Dream again, I think it might just be the Dream overall and just the crew, maybe, I don't know. So our dining room team and our room steward, they were both fine. Like, you know, in the dining room, we always had drinks that were refilled, which is great. They were nice, they were friendly. We had no bad experiences. You know, every time we came out of our room, the room steward was friendly, he knew our names. Like, it was totally fine. There was no bad encounters, nothing like that. But it just wasn't great. And maybe we've just been super lucky on the other ships to get, you know, a dining team that is just over the top amazing. I don't know. But it seems like on every other ship, it's just so much better. We've had, dining teams that are just funny, and they bring, puzzles and riddles and all sorts of stuff. And they just really take the experience up a notch. And it makes it why you would pay for Disney, like just having someone that's going to make sure your water is refilled all the time is great. But in my mind, that's not like why you pay for Disney. It's all of the other stuff. And, on our last cruise, we went on the Magic in May. Our dining team was absolutely fantastic. And, we looked forward to seeing them every night at dinner and, chatting. And it was a great experience. And it really added to the experience, where on this cruise, it was fine, right? Like they did nothing wrong. There were no bad experiences, but we didn't look forward to seeing them because really they didn't engage in a lot of conversation or anything like that. So I don't know. I think that just kind of added to all of the other stuff to just kind of make it a vacation. Now, this one may not be an issue if you've either never been on a Disney cruise, or you haven't been on one in a long time, or you just like to see the same thing over and over again. But personally, I think it's a little disappointing that they recycle shows so much across the ships. So obviously they have the Broadway show, that's different. So on the Dream, they had Beauty and the Beast. But then the other two Broadway style shows that they had were the Golden Mickeys, and then they had the one with the dad who's trying to grow the flower, and I forget, it's like either Believe maybe or Dreams, I think it's Believe. They had that, and we've seen those on other ships. So they had at least one of them on the Magic that we went on in May. So it just seems like they have so much talent, so much IP, like that they should have different shows for all of the ships so that it's a little more unique, I guess. My husband didn't even come to the last show because he was like, we just saw that in a couple months ago and didn't want to go. So again, if you haven't been before, or you haven't been for a while, or if my brother would watch it every single day and he'd be fine to see it again. So that's a personal thing, but it's just a little disappointing that they don't have more variety in their shows, just given, they have the talent, they have plenty of different, movies to pick from where they could pull scenes and do it a little bit differently. So that was just like a little bit disappointing. And then on a similar note, I know we don't talk about it anymore, but unfortunately, like COVID is still a thing. And I feel like in my everyday life, you don't notice it, but then you go on a cruise and it's just seems like you can't get away from it. And it may not all be COVID. I know there's other sicknesses out there that people get as well, but the amount of people sick and coughing on this cruise just got worse and worse and worse and worse every day. Now, I guess we finally learned our lesson, because the last several we've been on, we've come home sick. So this time we wore masks in all of the shows that we went to and really tried to not get sick. We wore masks on the plane, like all of that. And so far, none of us are sick, and it's been a week. So I think we're in the clear, but I know based on the Facebook page, a lot of people have tested positive. It sounds like they were starting to get sick mid-cruise. And so, were they staying in the room or not? I don't know. But it's just sitting in the theater and just hearing the coughing and coughing, it kind of takes away from the experience a little bit and just makes you kind of feel ew, which obviously that's not a Disney cruise specific thing. I think it's just the reality of being around a lot of people in a small space. But if that's something that's going to impact your experience, just have that in mind. That's going to apply to really any cruise. But unfortunately, people are still getting sick, and it just kind of makes you not even want to go to the shows because you don't want to catch whatever they have. And like all of my experiences with Disney customer service, it's been great. Anytime I have a question, anything, call in, you know, they are typically super helpful with their answers. But on this one, they were giving inaccurate information and just so unhelpful when it came to trying to plan. So one of the things about cruising in Europe is that a lot of the actual destinations that you want to go to aren't super close to the actual spot the ship docks. And so a lot of times there's, you know, a decent commute, you could say, to get to the place you actually want to go. And I would say on this trip, it was probably like 30 minutes to an hour, like at every port stop. So specifically in our last stop, which was the Stavanger stop, the place we actually docked was Makarvik, which I'm probably saying wrong. But it was a 30-minute drive to the actual town of Stavanger. So that's where all of the boats would leave from. That's really where you want to go. The place we docked was like an industrial shipping area. There was absolutely nothing to do there. And so trying to, as I mentioned before, we had to book an excursion through a third party. So all of Disney's were sold out, which we typically do a mix. We sometimes do through the cruise line, we sometimes do our own thing. So that wasn't a huge deal that we had to book outside of Disney, except we didn't know how we were going to get to Stavanger. So the tour company that we booked with was super accommodating and very helpful. And, you know, I reached out to them and I said, you know, we're docking here. Obviously we need to meet you here. Do you have any recommendations on how to get from point A to point B? And they told me that cruise lines always offer shuttles and that really there's not a lot of taxis. Public transportation's not super convenient. Like that every cruise line that comes there offers a shuttle. And they're like, so I'm sure your cruise will offer a shuttle. So I was like, oh, okay, perfect. So I called Disney and asked if they were going to have a shuttle, and they told me no. And they told me that that I could avoid this issue by booking through them, which I reminded them they don't have anything available. Like, I can't book through you. Like, there is nothing. And she told me no. And she told me that their recommendation was to use the public bus transportation, which, like, I don't mind doing that if it's reasonable. But in my research, like, the bus stop was not near where we were parking. Like, it was closer than Stavanger, but it was a decent walk. And like, it just seemed very like not a good solution. And I know based on the Facebook group for this cruise, like tons of people were having the same concern and the same question. And they were all getting the same response from Disney when they called, that like there was not going to be a shuttle. And a lot of people were super stressed out about it and ended up canceling, you know, their third-party tours because they just didn't want to stress about how they were going to get there and make sure they got there on time and all of that, which is super unfortunate because when we got there, they ended up having a shuttle. And so it was like, okay, great, but why didn't you tell us that? Like, it's very hard to plan when you don't have all of the information. So that was a little bit unfortunate. And then we didn't experience this personally because we had a tour that we knew we needed to be like first off the ship. So we were lined up to get off like almost an hour before the time they told us we could get off. So we were one of the first ones off and we were on one of the first shuttles out of the port. So at least we got on the shuttle and like we were able to go. We ended up being late for our tour, but they hadn't left yet, fortunately. Like, we had to run from our bus to the tour. The bus driver got lost. It was kind of a mess, but we got there and ended up on the tour, so it was fine. But I heard that, I guess, after the first round of buses left, there was a delay in them coming back with traffic or something like that, and I guess it was a huge mess of people trying to get off the ship, and they like stopped letting people off, and it kind of was super messy. So I think just in general, those logistics were not the best. And I think that's kind of a lesson for cruising in Europe in general, that there's a lot of logistics that make things hard. And it's because most of the time you cannot just get off the ship and be in a area that you want to be. Like, you have to travel to get to anything you want to see. For example, when we were in Copenhagen, they had shuttles again that took you to a spot. And the spot they dropped you off, it was a pretty quick walk to see the Little Mermaid statue, which was great because I'm sure everybody wanted to see that. So they dropped you off and it was maybe a 5 to 10 minute walk to go see that. Cool. But then once you were done with that, there was really nothing else around there. And from there you had to go into like the town, which was probably a mile and a half walk. So for us, it's not a huge deal. We're in our early 30s and we can walk, you know, far, maybe just be lazy, but we can. But there's people that can't, you know, young kids, older people, people who are hurt. You know, there's plenty of reasons people can't do those kinds of walks. So, you know, of course you could book a tour through the cruise line and then you're on a bus all day. And, you know, obviously there's options, but we ended up walking, and luckily we just passed a metro station and we were like, well, let's see if there's a faster way on like the subway. And if you end up in Copenhagen, the subway is so clean, so nice, so easy to use, cheap. Highly recommend using that. So we were able to jump on that and it saved us, you know, a good bit of walking, but it's just not convenient, you know, especially, you know, in the Caribbean, right? You get off the ship and there's stuff there, there's like taxis there waiting to take you places. It's just not the same. And to me, you know, flying to Europe and doing a land trip, you expect a lot of that, right? You know you're gonna walk, you plan accordingly, you know you're gonna be on subways, buses, trains, whatever, and that's part of the trip. The advantage of a cruise is that you don't have to think about that kind of thing, right? It's easy. You just show up where you need to be. And so I feel like you don't have that in these kinds of destinations. So just something to be aware of, I guess, if you're thinking about planning an itinerary like this. The only cruise we had done in Europe before this one was the Greek islands, which I liked a lot better. And it's probably the only like Europe cruise I would do again, just because it is more like what you think of with a cruise, where you get off and you're at an island and you go to the beach, and you know, it's not, I don't know, that to me was super fun. This, I think I would rather just fly to Europe and do a Europe trip. After the cruise, we actually flew to Rome and did a few days in Rome. And I think all three of us voted that we enjoyed the couple days in Rome than the whole entire cruise to Northern Europe. So for what it's worth. Okay, now like I said, nothing bad happened, right? It was just kind of the whole thing. So there were some highlights, there were some good. It was not all bad, and I feel like this video is so negative, and like I don't want it to be totally negative. So some of the highlights, we did get to see the new, I think it's called the Color Spin Deck Party show, and that was great. We enjoyed that a lot. The music was so fun. I think it's kind of geared towards our age group. So I'm 33, and it was kind of a lot of the songs that like I grew up with, and they were almost like remixed versions of the songs. So we really enjoyed that. It was also new. It was something we hadn't seen before. So that was probably part of it too, just because the rest of the cruise, a lot of it kind of felt very repetitive from the other cruises that we've done. So I think it was refreshing, like something new and different, and we really enjoyed that. Second, we had fantastic weather. When you research this part of the world and these places in particular, you'll see that it rains a lot there. Like we were expecting rain every day, and I took up about half of my suitcase with rain boots and raincoats and all the gear, and we didn't see a drop of water the entire week. It was warm. It was too warm. Like I didn't pack for that. You know, I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to Norway. I need like fleece and pants, and I was wearing shorts and a t-shirt every day, wishing I had tank tops. Like it was so warm. The weather was great. I didn't pack for the weather, which was kind of a problem, but it was nice. We had no rain, which, you know, things are just nicer to walk around and see when the weather's out nice and the sun's out. So we got super lucky with that. And one thing that was also very nice is that, you know, we had sunny days, it was warm. I was on the pool deck in a bathing suit and I wasn't cold, but the pool decks weren't packed like they are, you know, in the Caribbean or on a warm weather cruise. So I think people just weren't necessarily in that mindset that they were like going on a cruise to lay out in the sun, maybe. So people were just doing other things. And so the pool deck area wasn't as crowded. We had no trouble finding a seat, you know, to watch a funnel vision movie or anything like that. The pools themselves, you know, as usual, like the family pool was pretty crowded. There were some times where I like wanted to get in and then I looked at it and I'm like, there's really no room to get in. So it was crowded. It wasn't nearly as crowded as it would have been like in the Caribbean probably, but it was still pretty crowded. The adult pool though there was always space in there. So it was nice. That part was great just as far as like the crowds go. In all of the excitement, I forgot to record an outro and now it's dark outside. So have you ever been on a Norwegian Fjords cruise or Northern Europe? If so, what was your experience? Did you have similar thoughts or completely different? I would love to hear in the comments below. And if you like this kind of content, please consider giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing to my channel. It really helps me out. Well, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.